Well, welcome back to Classic Working Vehicles. So something a bit different for this episode, looking at what was known as the Polymark Beaver Rapid Transit Backhoe. This was a vehicle I restored about 10 years ago, and this video footage was shot about 8 years ago, but I thought we'd have a look at it. In the early 1980s, Land Rover was going through quite a few changes. It was launching first of the coil-sprung Land Rovers, the 110, and shortly after the 90. And it was also looking again at its specialist vehicle operations, what at the time was called Special Projects Department, but by the mid-1980s it became known as Special Vehicle Operations. And what they wanted to do was to sell directly various conversions of the Land Rover to commercial customers. And one of the conversions they wanted to offer was a backhoe. It wasn't the first time Land Rover had tried to do this. A company called AirDrive had produced a model called the Harrier based on a Series 2A Land Rover with a backhoe, but it was never very successful. So another company, Polymark Beaver, who already made backhoe loaders for compact tractors, decided they would have a go and convert one of the new Land Rover 110s. So Polymark acquired a prototype 110 to build the prototype Rapid Transit Backhoe, which is the same Land Rover that's featured in the original brochure for the type. Land Rover decided to take this on as a product and offer it through their dealerships, but it was never very successful. As far as I know, only 3 were actually built. There may be others out there, but I'm only aware of evidence of 3, and the one I restored being one of them. The story was that there was the prototype, which Polymark Beaver kept themselves, and then Land Rover had their own demonstrator built, which is the one you see here. And it was demonstrated to the British Army. It appeared on some trade stands at shows. But by 1990, the company had actually sold the Land Rover off. I did find some photographic evidence of a third one that was also produced. I don't know who bought it or what it was bought for, but I found no more than that. And as far as I'm aware, this one I restored nearly 10 years ago now is the only survivor of the type. I sold it a few years ago. It now belongs to a friend of mine who was keen to acquire it. And often for me, once I've restored an unusual vehicle, I'm interested in what I might restore next, rather than necessarily keeping it as a collector. But I did find, as you can see here, quite a few uses for the vehicle around my property, doing fencing and so on. So I rediscovered this footage from nearly a decade ago recently, and I thought it might be interesting to put up on the channel for viewers to see. Anyway, you can see it here putting in fence posts, and then a bit later on in the footage you see it converted over to its backhoe role doing some digging. So to put the hydraulics for the digger into action, you need to put low ratio in neutral. Main box goes into second gear, and then down here there's a knob you pull forward. You can see it says PTO in and out. Okay, so that's out, and that's in. PTO is engaged. Then when you lift the clutch, that's now spinning the PTO. The machine's also got a governor. I've set this up so it's at maximum torque, which is 1800 RPM with this engine, and it's got a master switch that you throw here, and then I've fitted a secondary switch actually on the digger itself, on the operator's seat, so I can bring the revs up when I'm sat in the seat. Originally the revs came up as soon as you turned that on, but I found if you're using the machine and you're jumping on and off it, or you're working with somebody else, it's handy to be able to drop the revs while still in the operator's seat. Anyway, let's go and have a look at the other end. So you can see the controls here. Left hand control sideways is for slewing. As you can see, we're just at tick over at the moment. See it slewing. Forward and back raises and lowers the boom. And one controls the dipper, and then when you're in backhoe mode, left and right would control the buckets, but in this case it controls the auger. It uses that hydraulic circuit to power the hydraulic motor at the top there for the auger, and when it's got that attachment. So let's see if we can auger a hole. So I'll put the stabilizer legs down, that's these two levers in the middle. Let's bring the revs up. So here you can see me changing it over from the auger setup to the digger setup. So it was quite a versatile machine, but changing between roles was actually quite heavy work and took a bit of time. So it wasn't something you'd want to do that frequently. The other disadvantage, I would say, with it as a practical vehicle was its manoeuvrability. You certainly wouldn't want to be using it on a building site or something of that sort. It just didn't have a good enough steering rock really to be used in that way. But for things like fencing, where you're doing a long line of work or a long line of trenching somewhere remote, it would have been ideal for that. And obviously the key benefit it had was in its title, a rapid transit backhoe. So, you know, it could go the speed of a standard Land Rover on the road, and it could also tow a trailer if necessary. So I guess in certain niche roles it would have been useful. I think if the British Army maybe had taken it on, it would have been more successful. But that wasn't to be. So it ended up being a real rarity of the vehicle. And as I say, as far as I know, only this one survived.